This is Garis, Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 511, part 2, entitled, "If you monoconscious feminists don't become biconscious, we biconscious masculists will bite your fucking heads off." Carrying straight on. Women oppress men badly, that is, in ways that last decades, in other ways, besides in the hated divorce courts. Women pill lie, that is, they lie to their boyfriends/husbands that they are taking the pill, but aren't, get pregnant, then, by law, force the man to work for decades to pay for a kid he never wanted in the first place. This is manslavery on a massive scale and is utterly hated by the masculists. So those women who do this are utterly hated by the masculists and spat at. Later, when masculist thinking is universal, such women will be thrown in jail for years. To combat this massive gender crime committed by women against men, masculists are pushing for the legislation of the PARER, P-A-R-E-R, that's paternity rejection right, that would allow an unwilling father to fill in a government form that frees him of the obligation to pay for a kid he doesn't want. If the mother goes ahead with the pregnancy, then, by law, she takes full financial responsibility for the costs of the kid. If she is a FIP, she can afford it, which is one of the many reasons why masculist theorists place such importance on the FIPPing of women, on the creation of a FIP society, which will go a long way in solving most of the gender problems that men have. Another decades-lasting problem that men have with women is women's paternity fraud, where in about 5% or so of pregnancies, the husband is not the father. Imagine the callousness and heartlessness of a woman who lies to her husband that the kid growing in her is his when she knows it isn't. Masculists have a real hatred of such women and aim to put them behind bars for years for committing such a callous, decades-lasting gender crime against men. Masculists are pushing for the legislation of the OPTAB, that's O-P-T-A-B, which is obligatory paternity testing at birth, for all births, so that men can know they are the father or not. If not, he can pursue the option of prosecuting his woman, sending her to jail for years. With the PARER, he will not be obliged to pay for a kid that is not his, and he can severely punish the callousness of his woman who has done such a horrible thing to him. The OPTAB will stop a lot of women from the major gender crime of paternity fraud. Masculists are very political and angry. They are pushing for the establishment of GECs, that's GECs, in the parliaments. A GEC is a Gender Equality Committee that, by definition, consists half of female feminists and half of male masculists, with the aim of dealing with the gender issues of both sexes equally, in brackets. E.g., the masculist half will occupy themselves with the men fairing of the divorce courts, the FIPPing of women, the creation of a FIP society, the legislation of the PARER and the OPTAB, etc., close brackets, which is far from being the case today due to the overwhelming monoconsciousness of the feminists who have been brainwashed for 6 decades that gender oppression is a one-way street. So it is entirely logical for monoconscious feminists to feel that gender equality is definitely only a feminist issue, so that these GECs should be filled only with feminists, that is, monoconscious feminists. This attitude of the monoconscious feminists obviously seems utterly bigoted and hypocritical to biconscious masculists who see clearly, due to their masculist knowledge, that in reality women oppress men far worse, so that men need to be liberated from women's oppression far more strongly. Thus we have here a clash in worldviews between the monoconscious feminists on the one hand and the biconscious masculists on the other hand. The monoconscious feminists see the political push of the masculists as just more male privilege, trying to diminish the efforts of the feminists to liberate women from the ways that men oppress women. But since, by definition, these monoconscious feminists know nothing about masculism, they do not have the worldview of the masculists, that in fact women oppress men far worse, since many of the ways that women oppress men last decades, and hence are far more significant than the relatively minor ways that men oppress women, that the feminists keep harping on. For example, even rape, which is one of the worst ways that men oppress women, is seen by the masculists as being rather small beer in comparison to a fluffies, decades-lasting man's slavery of a man. So how to break this impasse in worldviews between the monoconsciousness of the feminists and the biconsciousness of the masculists? Question mark. The obvious answer is to convert the monoconscious feminists into becoming biconscious by teaching them masculist ideas, so that, by definition, they have both their feminist and their masculist consciousnesses raised. But how to do that? How do you convert a bigoted, utterly brainwashed, monoconscious feminazi who has been pumped full all her life with the idea that gender oppression is a one-way street, that it is men who are the enemy, that it is men who are the oppressors, to see the masculist viewpoint, namely that it is women who are the greater gender oppressors than men? Question mark. A monoconscious feminist will very probably suffer cognitive dissonance when she hears for the first time an angry, hateful masculist harangue her with masculist ideas, masculist rhetoric in a public meeting or conversation. People strongly dislike having their core beliefs strongly challenged. In the past, it has led to many wars. For example, the religious wars in Europe several centuries ago, the 30 Years' War in Germany, for example, in the 1600s, killed off a third of the German population. So how can the masculists convert monoconscious feminists to biconsciousness? Question mark. One advantage that the masculists have over the feminists is that they are male, with 10% larger brains, and being 10 times more aggressive, with 10 times greater testosterone levels in their blood. So we masculists are in the position, once there are enough masculists in a room, to be able to collectively bite the fucking heads off these monoconscious, misandrist, hypocritical, genociding feminazis. Women evolved to fear men's greater strength and aggressiveness. So once masculist ideas have spread enough over the next few years, then masculists will be in a position to truly bite these monoconscious feminist fucking heads off with a truly vitriolic, hateful, masculist critique, threatening these women that if they don't become biconscious faster than their currently monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, in brackets, given that women are 99.5% heterosexual, close brackets, then they will face a serious risk that their male feminist boyfriends will become bi-conscious faster than they do. In which case, these newly bi-conscious boyfriends will start seeing their monoconscious feminist girlfriends as MFBs. Which is a masculist acronym for monoconscious feminazi bigot, who is close-minded towards the idea that gender oppression is a two-way street. Once this former monoconscious male feminist boyfriend becomes biconscious, he will see his monoconscious girlfriend as bigoted, and hence he will become disgusted with her, and then he will dump her. Masculists are predicting that in the coming decade, millions of monoconscious feminists are going to lose their former monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, as these boyfriends become biconscious and see that in fact women oppress men far worse, and become disgusted at the gynocentric, myopic, solipsistic mentality of their former girlfriends and dump them, millions of them. We will thus see something analogous to what happened in the 70s, when millions of freshly minted feminists divorced their traditional husbands who could not cope with the new feminist attitudes of their wives. Pretty soon, given the way the manosphere is growing, in brackets, manosphere equals men talking about men's issues on the internet, close bracket, there'll soon be a bunch of masculists in a room, so their very angry, hateful presence will definitely make itself felt, so they'll be in a position to state their case forcefully. So if they are well informed, well versed in masculist ideas and rhetoric, they'll be able to make a strong case that gender oppression is definitely a two-way street, and that society needs the creation of the gex in the parliaments, the passage of the para, the op-tab, the men-fairing of the divorce courts, etc. Women are genetically more timid than men. So when we men collectively become angry at women, this can be terrifying for women, especially when men are in groups. So it is in the masculist self-interest to spread their ideas so that there are more of us, millions of us, so that in meetings and conversations by the millions, we are in a position to educate monoconscious feminists into biconsciousness. Once this happens enough, sooner or later, the monoconscious feminist-dominated mainstream media will start examining the masculist case and reporting on it to the masses. Also, the millions of young women, as millions of young women scream at their babylessness, these monoconscious feminist journalists will report on this too, and be obliged to explain just why these young women's boyfriends, time after time, refuse to give them their sperm. Thus, little by little, the masculist and MGTOW cases will penetrate the minds of the public. But these confrontations between the monoconscious feminists and biconscious masculists initially will not be pretty. They will be bloody, because very angry, brainwashed feminists will interpret the anger and hatred of the biconscious masculists towards them as just more male misogyny. Since they are monoconscious, they will have no understanding why the masculists are so angry and full of hatred towards them. So the masculists will simply have to ram their masculist ideology down these feminazis' throats with brute male force, forcing these women to realise, quote, "Shit! What has happened to men? They act as though they have found a new religion. Why are they now so energetic and hateful towards us? They are really scary now. What the fuck are they talking about?" End quote. The more open-minded monoconscious feminists will be the first to convert themselves into being biconscious by bothering to absorb masculist ideas. Those less open-minded will face a greater risk of being dumped by their freshly minted biconscious boyfriends, as these men convert themselves from being their former monoconscious male feminist boyfriends to becoming their now biconscious masculist ex-boyfriends. Masculists have several powerful tools to bite the fucking heads off monoconscious feminists. We can terrify them with the loss of their boyfriends, thus causing them to become manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at by men for being misandrist, feminazi shits who men despise and refuse to have relationships with. We masculists can bite their fucking heads off in public meetings and conversations. We can convert the monoconscious feminist journalists to become biconscious. We can greatly increase the number of masculists so that millions of monoconscious feminists are converted into biconsciousness simply by mass exposure to masculist ideas that come to them from all sides, from many, many masculists who live all around them. What monoconscious feminists have to learn is that their monoconsciousness is hated by the masculists. So that if they don't convert themselves into becoming biconscious, then the masculists in their lives and their environment will truly, quote, bite their fucking heads off, end quote. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, and e-textbook of 510 plus Masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.